Oye, Ñelora. So, this video lesson is going to deal with, once again, our ISAT Round 2 B series. In this case, we're now going to take a look at the Sheets lesson. Now, I'm talking about this being the second video because I just finished filming the actual other one for STK. We're going to build on some of the stuff that we set up in that STK video, so if you haven't looked at it yet, you might go back and take a look at it. I talk a little bit more about the scenario itself. I'm not actually going to go into deeper detail on this because I've already done that in one of the videos. That is an important one to take a look at on this. But we talk about our end goals on what we're trying to do to make the best choices on our selections for a satellite in orbit around Mars. Now, one of the key things that we did in the previous video was we actually exported a series of CSVs. Now, I've got important information down here in different tabs. We're going to talk about different tabs. Here's actually a copy of the tables from the scenario. I typed those in so that I had them. I've also got some of the scoring approaches that I'm going to take a look at as well, but that would make this an incredibly long video. So instead of trying to put all of it here into the Sheets video, I've decided to split it off, and this video is going to be focused around the skills in Sheets that you would need to then go through to try and do some of the scoring. I'm going to have a link somewhere on the actual ISAT page. I guess I can go back to that. ISAT B series. Right now you can see there's a bunch of stuff missing because I'm literally in the process of filming this video now, and I hope to be filling in some of the other scenarios sometime soon, but they're going to take me probably a good 8 to 10 hours each to actually write and build and do all of those scenarios to set them up. I have plans for scenario 2 of this series coming soon, so I'm going to mark that, but I may put off doing scenario 3 for a little while. One other thing that I'm probably going to do is I'm going to link beneath these, it doesn't exist yet, but a link to a page where I'm actually going to set up some of the ideas on different methods that you could use to go about solving these types of problems. And you should probably watch this video first before checking those out, because that video is going to involve some of the things that we set up here, which brings me back to the Sheets. Now, the key thing that we really want to do is, as we set up in our STK video, once again, if you haven't seen it, you might want to go see it, is we exported some of the very important reports. In fact, I'll go back over there. Here's Eyes on Mars. We had some of the reports, and in particular, the report of contact times between the MCRN satellite and the ground station on Olympus Mons that I'm calling OGRE. So this is the report that has all that information. I also exported things like the contact time between the satellite and Earth, but all that told me was we had complete contact time. I didn't actually have to do much with that. We're going to come back to that towards the end of this video as I get you prepared for the non-existent scenario, but partly planned scenarios that come after Eyes on Earth. But first, we got the main report that we're actually after, which is the access times. Now, I also brought up that we could get the gap times report as well, but I'm going to show you that we can actually make our own gap time report. We just need the information in this access report, and then we'll be able to do a lot of things with it. And that is something that we'll build on after this video in some of the lesson videos that talk about methods for solving this. Okay, but what do we need to be able to do? The key thing that we're going to focus on in this video is how to import the CSVs that we generated and exported in the STK video, and a little bit on how to work with some of the numbers that are built into it. Okay, ooh, I can type @emoji to insert an emoji. Okay, ignoring that. For Sheets, you'll need to go to File and Import. Now, if you're doing this instead in Excel, which is actually the place where I was working this scenario originally, was on Excel instead of Sheets, both of them are great in their own way, but if you're in Excel, you'll want to go to Data and then Import Data. But for Sheets, we go to just File and Import. Okay, so we've got My Drive, or if it's on your desktop, which yours probably is because you've downloaded them and hopefully put those files in a place that can be found easily, not just your downloads folder. I can click Upload and I can go to Browse. Now I can go looking for the materials that I want. It by default goes to my Upload folder because I usually pull from there. It looks like I have an old CSV in there from another scenario. Maybe I should delete some of my old files. But I'm going to go to my desktop where I've created a folder to actually work this. We're looking at ISAT 2B1. Now, I can bring in each of these reports, but the main one that I actually want to bring in is the access report between the satellite and the facility. So I'm going to do that. It's going to bring it up, and I've got several options. We have create new sheet, or I can insert new sheet, replace current spreadsheet, that sort of thing. It might be easiest to do, I think create new not create new spreadsheet, because I think that creates an entirely new file. I'm going to do insert new sheets, and then on the separator type, it comes up on detect automatically. Sheets has actually been pretty good on this. This is one thing that makes it a little bit different. If you're doing this in Excel, you would import this, and then you would need to select the separator type. You'll probably want comma. I think it comes up on colon by default. If you do colon, it won't be able to do the stuff that you want, so you'll need to switch it to comma. But one of the upsides of Sheets is really good at detecting this automatically, so I'm going to just trust it, hopefully I'm not mistaken, and click Import Data. And it takes a moment, and then I can see my information is actually nice and spread out in Sheets. And it has created a new tab, a new sheet down here, instead of creating an entirely new file. I believe that's what the first option is, but I want this to actually exist in the Sheets where I'm working on my solutions. So I want to add it in here, just like we saw a moment ago. Okay, now that I've got that, it even names the tab for me, Satellite MCRN to Facility Ogre Access. Okay, so we've got everything that we need in here. In fact, this is even easier to use in Sheets than it is in Excel. This is one of the places where I heavily recommend Sheets because Sheets actually makes it much easier to work with these timestamps. In fact, you won't have to do very much at all. If you're in Excel, and I believe I have some videos in my importing, exporting CSVs in the, I'm going to plug it real quick, General Knowledge, going over to Spreadsheet Skills, there is a video, in fact I'll go to it right now, where we've got importing CSVs. I believe in that video, which is currently live, we have part of it which has at least Sheets, and then the end of the lesson also shows how to achieve the same in Excel, which has a few different steps. So I'm not going to cover that in this video, but here's where you could go if you are using Excel, which is also good for a bunch of reasons, but they're slightly different in how they work. Okay, now I have my access report, and it has all the information that we saw in STK. You may be thinking, okay, well that's great, why don't I just use the values from STK? But if I want all the individual values, and I think I do, then it would take me a long time to type in 96 of them. Instead, let me show you how to work with this. I'm going to double check that I know how to work with these just fine. I'm going to call this duration in minutes. And here's what I'm going to do. Sheets identifies each of these timestamps. They're written out in a common format, and Sheets actually can read this and go, oh, I've been programmed to, I don't want to say no, but it recognizes that what is in here is actually 14th of October, 2350, 3:55:48 UTC. And then the start time was October 14th, 2350 at 3:11. So here's what I can do. I can go over to my duration, and I'm going to have my spreadsheet do some math. I'm going to do equals. And what I want it to do is I'm going to take my stop time minus my start time and hit enter. Now it gives me a weird number. This says 0.030752. Here's the key, something that you need to know. When you do one date minus the other, the default number that it gives back, it's actually subtracting the two, but it's giving you that value in days. So I'm going to take this value, the stop time minus the start time, and that's in days. Now I'm going to multiply it by 24 to turn it into hours, or I can then turn it into minutes by multiplying it by 60. So I'm going to take the difference of these two, times 24 to turn it into hours, or if I want into minutes, times 60. I hit enter, and we see that it is now giving me 44.28335. Hey, that's actually even more precision, not saying we need it, but more precision than the STK default access report actually gives me. Stellar Explorers has mentioned that their grading system can go all the way to, I think, something like 6 or 7 decimal places. Here's why. It's not actually relying on just the report, it's pulling the information and doing what we're doing here. Instead of multiplying by 24 and then multiplying by 60, 24 times 60 is 1,000, it says it right there, 1,440. So I can instead take the difference between these two, and if I want it in minutes, multiply by 1,440. Either of those works the same. Now that I've taught Sheets what to do with these start and stop times, I can now drag this down by grabbing the little circle on the bottom right, or the little square in Excel. And I drag it all the way down, and we see 9.773, 37.915. I can now recreate all of the numbers in this report. Well, I already have the numbers, but if I needed to, or if I needed to do something with those numbers, now I have a way of doing it. I also brought up that you could export the gaps report, but I actually emphasized using this technique before I realized that the gaps report was, of course, programmed into STK. So I'm going to use our knowledge to come up with the gaps in minutes. Okay, how do I do the gaps? Well, if I wanted the gap between the second contact and the first contact, I could do the following. I could hit equals, and just the same as before, I want the start of the second contact minus the end of the first contact. So that would give me the time between contacts. Now, it's asking me, hey, do you want me to read your mind and fill all these things in? My problem is this number is in days, not in minutes, like I want. So I'm going to tell it no, and I'm going to go back up, and now that I've set this up, I'm going to put it in parentheses and multiply by 1,440 to turn it into minutes. Okay, so I predict that the gap between the first contact and the second contact is 139.54 minutes. Well, let's go back over to STK. Now, this is our access report. We said we could also get the gaps report. So I go over to access, and instead of clicking on the access report, I click on report and graph manager, and I've got the gaps report right here in my favorites, so I can bring this up. We've got the gap between the second contact and the first contact happens and is 139.543. So going back, 139.543. Now that I've taught it this, I can drag this down, just the same as we did the other, and now I have all of the gaps as well. Now, I could have loaded the gaps report in, but then I would have had another tab that I'd have to copy information over when all the information I need is already right here in the access report. I just need to know how to actually solve that. Now, the first gap, I can't actually pull, at least the way that I did the others. I could go in and I could say, okay, my start time for the scenario was 14 October 2350 at 0100 hours, and then do it that way, or maybe I manually type this one in. I'm going to leave that one blank, at least for the time being, because I've shown you enough that you can actually get what we need to done. We can also see, referencing my other video, that we've got a pattern here. About 140 minutes, 140, 140, 160, and then 360 out of nowhere, then back to 140. About 140, about 140, 140, 140, 160, 360 again. And if you keep going down, you'll find that there's a pattern to these numbers. There's a spike in there. Well, that happens when Mars turns such that Olympus Mons is no longer seen from our orbit, so we have a long, what I call, dark period, a large gap. And during that gap, we're constantly adding data onto our hard drive until our hard drive gets full. Now, that's one of the important things that this particular setup allows you to do. Not only can we see the patterns here, but now I've actually brought in all the information I need to keep a running total of exactly how much information is added to my hard drive and how much information is removed from my hard drive. Because when I'm in contact with the ground site, this represents the time that I have to remove data, and these help me get, but are not entirely, the amount of time that I'm adding data without removing any. All of those are important things if we want to do an incredibly thorough job on solving our scenario. Okay. Those are some of the key things that I wanted to show you, but I'm not going to finish up there just yet. That's enough for us to actually tackle the first scenario in this series, but while the second one doesn't exist yet, I have a clear idea of what I want to do with it, which brings me to, I pulled an old scenario, ISAT Round 1, B Series, number 2, Relay Delayed. Now this is one that at the time, I didn't ask you all to do this, but I hinted at it. I gave you a simplified scenario because our goal was to get information from South America and relay it to a target up in North America. Now in that scenario, you would actually be changing the orbit, so these reports would change every time you change your orbit out. When you get to the semifinals materials, when I have those on my site, or in the competition, you'll find that you're probably going to be doing that. Changing both the orbit and having to choose things like a hard drive to go along with it, which means every time you change your orbit, that changes your access times. You have to refresh this and then export that file so that you can do some work on it. Well, let me show you the last part that I wanted to show you in this to get you set up for what's to come, and might be useful in the very near future, depending on when you're watching this video. So I want to bring in the reports. What I did in that scenario was I went ahead and brought up the access report between ISAT, the satellite, and South America. So this report is when I'm adding data to the satellite, and the other report is from the satellite down to OU. That's when I'm removing data. But they don't happen necessarily at the same time, and one of them, unlike our first scenario here, Eyes on Earth, isn't just a constant. Every time a minute goes by, you add a certain amount on. Here is my addition, and here is my subtraction. All right, so let's see what we can do with this if I had to do a scenario, hint, hint, that is actually like this. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to import, let's see, upload. I'm going to go to Browse, and I put all of these on my desktop in ISAT 1B2. Again, organizing your information is key. I'm going to bring in all of my report for, this is from the satellite to South America. So this is adding information. Create new spreadsheet. I'm going to do insert new sheet, import data. Okay, great. And then to make this simplest on me, I'm going to go down and I'm going to import again. And I'm just going to import into a new tab the other one. This is removing all of the data. And so, or removing as much of the data as I can. Import data. So now I've got these two. And that brings me to what I'm going to do with them. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, I'm going to add an additional number on this. I'm going to say data added, question mark. In this case, everything in this list represents when I'm adding data onto the satellite. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to type in 1 for true. And then I'm going to drag this down, and I'm going to add 1 to every single one of these. Now that may seem a little weird. Why am I just putting a 1 next to it? But now I've got, along with the contact times for this, the satellite to South America, and I'm saying we are adding data with a 1. I'm going to go over to the facility, OU, contacting the satellite, data add, question mark, and no. This is when we are removing data, so we are not adding data. So I'm using a little bit of logic in this with programming. 1 means yes, or true, and 0 means no, or false. Okay, why have I done this? Last thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to create one more sheet, and I'm going to combine these two. I'm going to go over to when I'm adding all the data, and I'm going to grab the accesses. I don't actually care about those that much, but I'm going to take all the information here. I'm going to Control-C, copy it, and I'm going to go over to this new tab that I actually made. Let's see if I can. Where is my... Did I create a new one there? No, that's tables. Okay, I don't know why it was acting weird, but here's sheet 4. I'm going to paste this in. I'm going to remove all of the titles and headers, and I'm going to ignore the stuff at the bottom where it's giving me averages, because I can always find those myself if I wanted to. I'm now going to go and do the same thing, except with my offloading data. So I'm going to highlight all those. I'm going to copy them. And I don't know why it's doing this, but sheet 4. Now at the bottom of this, where the last one ends, I'm going to paste this one in. Now here's what I'm going to do. What I really need Some of these times I'm adding data, and some of these times I'm removing data. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight everything on this page. Now that I've got it highlighted, I'm going to filter this. I'm going to filter it based on the starting time. What things happen first? This is a chronological sorting. Okay, so I'm going to do the drop down here, and let me see. I believe it's this. This looks like a little funnel. This is a create a filter. That's my sort and filter. Now it takes the top row on this and allows me to actually sort by these things. So watch, I want to sort by column B, which is the start time. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to sort. It says from A to Z by filter values. I'm trying to remember exactly which one I want to do. I think it's fine for me to go to A to Z. Is that right? No, that did not work. Let's see. Sort. No, not by color. Filter by color. Filter condition. Filter by value. I should be able to sort this chronologically. Oh, okay. It looks like it is sorting it chronologically, so I'm going to click OK. Yes, here we go. I apologize. So we've got the following. When I look at this, it has reordered them, and I certainly hope it has done so correctly. I'm more used to this in Excel than I am in Sheets. I usually do this in Excel, so hopefully I've got this right. But we can see that we've got these in the correct order. So we've got 6/9, June 9th, 2014, when this scenario was programmed to take place, and we start at 02:32 hours. We have contact, and we can see here, now by putting them in chronological order with the default orbit that I've got, look at the ones and the zeros. I've got a bunch of orbits back to back where I'm adding information. I add 12.8 minutes of information on this orbit, then 13.5, then all of these. And then the way my orbit works, I start actually getting contact with the northern hemisphere, and I start removing information. Then I have a little while that I'm in contact with the southern hemisphere. I add more information. Then I have a bunch where I remove information. Now, I'll be honest, what I probably want to do in this case is, if I could, set up an orbit so that I add information, but then hopefully remove information by the next time I come around. But you may not be able to do that. The important thing is this. I've now taken all of these contacts, some of them that add information from South America, and some of them that remove information to North America, and I have combined them and put them in chronological order. That means in time order. So I can actually go through, and wherever there's a 1, I can say take this amount of time and multiply it by however many megabytes I'm making per minute and add that into my hard drive. And then I've got all of these that are adding all of that information. And then finally I get to the point where I can start emptying my hard drive. Every time I have a 0, and I could program this in with an if statement, if 1, calculate the time, the data based on this time and adding. And then over here, 0, if it's 0, then calculate it to remove the data instead. And I can actually keep track of adding and removing data, hopefully in real time. The only thing that might be problematic is if one of my times overlaps another, then I have to worry about adding and removing data at the same time. You might deal with the block data storage method, which we will see in one of my later series, but that's going to be down the road. This was the last thing that I wanted to show you. I'm going to leave this here, and what you do with it from here is entirely up to you, but this is a way that you can actually take your values that STK gives you and bring them into a spreadsheet where you have more direct control over them and can start using those numbers to make the best decisions for your design. All right. Hopefully that was helpful. Until next time.